Solving quadratic equations, which method is best, part 2. So in the first video, I reviewed each method as well as showing you one example. In this video, I'll be doing 2 more examples of what I prefer, which method is best. Let's see another example of these. Here I have 6x squared minus 7x is equal to 10. Again, I suggest that you pause the video right here, see if you can figure out which method works best for you, and see if you can come up with the correct answers using that method. And if you would like to check your answers, they are at the top right-hand corner of your screen. Okay, to solve this one, I automatically have to eliminate the square root method as one of my options, because I do not have a single x squared. I also have an x variable involved. So my square root method does not work. So I'm going to use my second choice, which is the factoring method. But it doesn't matter if you would have used the factoring method or the quadratic formula method, because either one of those methods ask you to put this in standard form. So that means I need to put it in descending order, set it equal to 0. So I would have moved my 10 to the other side. So I need to subtract 10 from both sides of this equation. That leaves me with 6x squared minus 7x minus 10 is equal to 0. Okay, now in my factoring method, I need to factor this. So following my factoring checklist, I first have to look for common factors, which there are not any, and then I have to count my number of terms. I have 1, 2, 3 terms here, which means I solved this one using the trinomial or the unfoil method. So let me set up my parentheses to get me that. First, I need factors of 6x squared to put in my first places. I have a couple of choices here. I can use 1 times 6 or I can use 2 times 3. I like to use the ones that are closest together to start out with. So I'm going to use a 2 times 3 and then an x times x to give me my x squared. Now let me jump to my last, which is positive 10. Again, I need to figure out factors to give me 10. I can use 1 times 10 or I can use 2 times 5. And again, I usually start with the ones that are closest together, and I'm going to put them into my last places here. So I'm going to use my 2 and my 5. Now something I know not to do right away is to not put my 2 in the first place. And the way that I know that is because if I would have put my 2 there, then I would have had a 2 as a common factor in that set of parentheses. But if I did not have a 2 as a common factor up here, then I should not have a 2 as a common factor there. So that tells me I cannot put a 2 in that spot. So that means I need to put my 2 here. And if I put my 2 there, I need to put my 5 there. So my outside here, 2x times 2 gives me a 4x. My inside here, 5 times 3x gives me a 15x. Now I want to be able to add or subtract these to get to my middle term of a negative 7x. If I were to add those, that would have given me a 19x. Or if I would have subtracted those, that would give me an 11x. Neither one of those works to give me my negative 7x in the middle. So that tells me that I have this factored incorrectly. So I need to try and factor it in a different way. So instead of using my 2 times 3 and my 2 times 5, I'm going to keep one of them the same and I'm going to switch the other one. I'm going to keep my 2 times 5 and then I'm going to switch and use my 1 and 6 instead of my 2 and 3. And the reason that I made that choice is because 10 is a bigger number. Most likely it would have given me bigger answers. So that's why I choose to use the 6 instead of the 10. Okay, let's try and set this up again. So setting up my 2 sets of parentheses, in my first places, I said I'm going to use my 1 and my 6, and I need the x times x. In my last places, I said I'm going to use my 2 and my 5. Again, I know not to put 2 here because it would give me a common factor of 2 there. So that means that I need to put my 2 in my other place and my 5 here. And then don't lose the equal 0. That's the difference between solving and simplifying. My outside here, 1x times 5 gives me a 5x. My inside, 2x times 6x gives me a 12x. And I want to add or subtract these to give me that middle term of negative 7x. I can make that work if I make my signs of my 12 to be a negative and my 5 to be a positive. That does give me my negative 7x in the middle. So I find my 12, make it negative, and I find my 5 and make it positive. So I have finished factoring this problem. Now, with your factoring method, it says if you have something multiplied and set equal to 0, your principle of zero product says you split each of these up and set them equal to 0. And then you solve your remaining linear equations there. On my left, I isolate my x by adding 2 to both sides. Gives me the answer of x is equal to 2. On the right, I subtract 5 on both sides. Gives me the answer of 6x equals negative 5. And then to get rid of that 6, I divide by it. Gives me the answer of x is equal to negative 5, 6. So my answers here are x equals 2 and negative 5, 6. Or if it wants the solution set, you put both of those answers in the braces. Notice what type of answers that we ended up here. We ended up with pretty answers or rational answers, meaning that these answers are whole numbers or fractions. So the factoring method in this problem does work. However, you could have also solved this problem by using the quadratic formula. You would have gotten the same answer, it just probably would have taken you a few more steps to solve. Alright, let's move on to my last example. Negative 12x plus 9 is equal to 4x squared. Pause the video and try and figure out which method works best for you and see if you can get to the correct answers on the top right-hand corner of your screen. Okay, automatically I can again eliminate the square root method. I not only have a 4x squared, but I also have a negative 12x, which means the square root method does not work. So it doesn't matter whether I'm going to use the factoring or the quadratic formula. In this step, I have to set it equal to 0. I like to keep my leading term, the one with the highest exponent, positive. So I'm going to do that by moving everything else to the right. So I do that by adding 12x to both sides and subtracting 9 from both sides. So it gives me 0 is equal to 4x squared plus 12x minus 9. At this point, I like the factoring method, so I'm going to go ahead and try and factor this. This is a trinomial with 3 terms and no common factors, so I start it by setting up my parentheses. My first term of 4x squared. I have choices of using 1 times 4 and 2 times 2. I like to use the ones that are closest together, so I am going to use my 2x times 2x. My last term of 9. I have 2 choices. I can use 1 times 9 or I can use 3 times 3. I like to use the ones that are closest together, so I am going to use my 3 times 3. My outside here gives me a 6x. My inside here gives me a 6x. And I want to be able to add or subtract these together to give me my positive 12x in the middle. And that looks like it should work out. So if I have a positive 6x plus 6x, that does give me my positive 12x that I'm looking for in the middle. So I put my positives where they need to go. So I have a positive here and a positive here. However, if I look at this a little more closely, I see that this actually does not work out because I need a negative here. And if I double check my last, my positive 3 times my positive 3, that would give me a positive 9. And there's no way I can switch the signs to make that appropriate, to give me a positive 12x in the middle and a negative 9 at the last. So even though at first glance this looked like it factored in this way, it does not. If you would like to try again with the factoring method, that's perfectly fine. Just note that you cannot use your 2 and 2 together and your 3 and 3 together. So let's try and factor this again by setting up my 2 sets of parentheses. I'm going to keep my 3 and 3, and instead of using 2 times 2, I'm going to use a 1x times a 4x. My outside here would give me a 3x. My inside here would give me a 12x, and that would also not work to give me my 12x in the middle. So that one does not work. So let's try something else. This time let me keep my 2's the same in the front, and instead of using 3 times 3, let me use a 1 times 9. My outside here would give me an 18x. My inside would give me a 2x, and that again would not work to give me a positive 12x, no matter whether I've added them or subtracted them. So that one doesn't work. So I have to try it again. So this time, I've tried 2 and 2 with all the combinations. I tried 3 and 3 with all the combinations. So the only choices I have left are 1 and 4 and 1 and 9. So let me try a 1x and a 4x at the front. Now it does make a difference of where I put my 1 times 9. So let me just start and put my 1 here and my 9 there. If I did that, my outside would be a 9x, my inside would be a 4x, and again, that would not work to give me a positive 12x. So that doesn't work, and I only have one more choice of factoring this. Keep my 1x and my 4x, but switch my 9 times 1. My outside here would give me a 1x, my inside would give me a 36x, and that definitely would not work to give me my 12x in the middle. So we have tried all of our possible factoring choices. So that means that this problem does not factor. We cannot solve it using the factoring method. Now that's why some people don't try the factoring method, is because they get tired of trying which factoring combination will and will not work. So in this problem, our only choice in solving it is to use the quadratic formula. Now remember, I told you your answers of your factoring method would end up as pretty answers. So if you would have kind of cheated and looked at our answers up here above, you should have noticed that those are not pretty answers, so that this problem would have not been solved by the factoring method. So let's try and solve it using our quadratic formula method. Again, the first thing that we have to do is input it in standard form and set it equal to 0. So we have 0 is equal to 4x squared plus 12x minus 9. We move those to the other side by opposite operations. At this point, I can take out my a term, which is 4, my b term, which is 12, and my c term, which is negative 9. And I can plug those into my appropriate places using my quadratic formula. In this equation, my variable is x, So my formula will read as x equals. So I'm going to write down and sing this formula for you again in hopes that you can remember it easier. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So now all I have to do is plug in my appropriate a pieces for any place that I see an a, my appropriate b term for any place I see a b, and my appropriate c term for any place that I see a c. So plugging it in, I have x equals negative, my b value is 12, plus or minus square root, my b is 12 squared, minus 4 times my a value, which is 4, times my c value, which is negative 9, all over 2 times my a value, which is 4. So we get x is equal to negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 12 squared gives you 144. Take a notice of your signs here. We have a negative times a negative, which means that this is going to come up to be a positive here. 4 times 4 gives you 16, and 16 times 9 gives you 144. This is all over 2 times 4, which gives you 8. So you have x is equal to negative 12 plus or minus square root of 288, and that is all over 8. Now, to simplify this farther, I can simplify my square root of 288 using my good pi and my bad pi method. So my good pi is the square root of 144, because that is the largest square that divides evenly into 288, and my bad pi is the square root of 2, because 144 times 2 gives me 288. So moving down to my next step, I have x equals negative 12 plus or minus. Let's simplify this here. Square root of 144 gives me 12 with a root 2. And this is all over 8. Now remember, when you simplify these numbers, we have to simplify them all at once. And most of the time I do it by splitting it up, but I think that we can do it by keeping it all together here. I must simplify all of those numbers. The largest number that goes into all of them evenly is 4. 12 divided by 4 gives me 3. This 12 divided by 4 gives me 3. And this 8 divided by 4 gives me 2. So my answer is x equals negative 3 plus or minus 3 root 2 all over 2. And you could have actually split those up into 2 separate fractions, and you could have done it the answers that I have it as listed up there. Remember, if the problem asks for the solution set, it's the same set of answers, doesn't matter which way it's written, in your braces up here. So we have our answers there. So the only way that this problem could have been solved is using the quadratic formula method. Now hopefully this video has given you an idea of which method that you prefer and which method that you will always try and start with. Remember, you do not have to always do it the same way that I do it. We are all our own individuals, so we all prefer our own individual way of solving quadratic equations.